Hi everyone. So today we're super excited to be having our fifth Women in Fencing panel. So this one's a little bit different than the rest because we're doing an interview with Miss Val, and we're super excited to have her here today. We would like to thank her for joining us today and everyone in the audience for attending. And we're going to be talking a little bit about the physical health of athletes, but also the mental health of competitive athletes. And we thought that she would be the perfect person to talk about this. We'll start by introducing Miss Val really quickly. So she was the head coach of the seven-time NCAA champion, the UCLA women's gymnastics team. She was also recently named Coach of the Century. But most of you probably remember her from the viral floor routines performed by UCLA athletes, which stood out because they're perfect examples of what college sports should look like. So today we would like to talk to Ms. Val about how she was able to change the culture of gymnastics from being all about winning to having fun and enjoying the process. So we know that gymnastics is a unique sport because it's one of the few sports that's actually dominated by women. It's also an extremely competitive sport, and we're sure it also must be competitive in the coaching field as well. So we watched your TED Talk where you actually talk about how you didn't do gymnastics and you did ballet. So how did you start coaching gymnastics, and how were you able to rise through the ranks in such a competitive field?
First of all, I'm really excited to be speaking with both of you. I've never spoken with the audience of fencers before, and I have tremendous, tremendous respect for your sport. I love as we were speaking right when we got on, I love the kind of like old world manners and etiquette that comes across every time I watch your sport. So um, much, much respect for what you do. My story can be long, but I'm going to shorten it up for our time here. I've never done gymnastics. I was a professional ballet dancer. I also choreographed, and I decided out of high school that I was going to pursue a career in ballet as long as I could. And I was 22 years old, and I actually really, really missed school. And it wasn't like I wasn't super competitive in school because I'm not like super smart and just this brainiac, but I missed learning. Like I was one of those students that sat in the first few rows, and every time, like I probably asked more questions per class than any other student in class. And I missed that when I was just dancing. And so anyway, I was 22 years old, and I heard that UCLA needed a dance coach for their gymnastics team. And I thought, oh my gosh, like this would be amazing. And without any hesitation, I found out who the head coach was. I picked up the phone. I told him my credentials, and I made the ask. I asked if I could be their coach, their dance coach, and their choreographer. And he said to me, we don't have a salary to pay you, but we can give you a full scholarship, academic scholarship if you've not gone to school, to college. I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So that was 1982. I graduated. I was going to go be a journalist. And then I think simply because I had a really strong work ethic and I showed up every day with this really super positive attitude, a few years later, after I graduated, they did not renew the contract of the current head coach, and they called me in their office, and the athletic director asked me to be the new head gymnastics coach. And I laughed out loud and I said, you understand, I don't know the first thing about gymnastics. And all they said to me was, we trust you'll figure it out. And that was 1990. I started as the head coach. I had 29 years of a career, a very successful career in the world of athletics. And the important part about that story, the most important part about it, is that none of this, my entire adult life, would have been totally something different. I wouldn't be here talking with all of you today if I had been too afraid to pick up the phone and make the ask. And I think that's a super, super important skill for all of us to continue to work on, how to make an ask, how to nudge someone when you don't get the answer that you're hoping for initially, how to nudge without being annoying. And I think it's so important. I wrote a book about, I don't know how many years ago, 4 years ago or so, It's called Life is Short, Don't Wait to Dance. And there's a whole chapter in there about the importance of the ask, the nudge, and then learning when to drop it. So that's in a nutshell, my career.
Thank you so much. It's actually really cool to see how you were able to transfer some of your skills from ballet to gymnastics. So the other thing was like, since you were not a gymnastics coach, what was your coaching style like when you first started?
When I first started, I had one of these, like, this type of a coaching style where the coach is a dictator. I was a dictator. I didn't really understand the importance of developing relationships with my student athletes, even though that was the most natural thing for me to do, because that's part of my personality. Is I'm very human, people oriented. And that was part of this imposter syndrome that I had, trying to figure out how to coach and what it meant to be a successful coach. And when I started, the only metrics of success for coaching was winning. Because, I mean, think about it. Coaches aren't hired to be your mentor, your psychologist, your best friend. We're hired to win. We're hired to figure out how to win. And what I learned over my career was that not only can you win by having relationships, obviously healthy relationships with your athletes, with your student athletes, but by fortifying them and taking the time to help every one of my student athletes become the best versions of themselves they can be. Not only did we win, but we had a far better result than just winning. I mean, I'm here with you now because, as you said, so many UCLA gymnasts have gone viral over the last 5-6 years. Well, that doesn't happen just because you're scoring high. That happens because of the joy that they're exuding being in their performance. You said something else just now about, thank you for sharing my journey. I don't remember exactly you said. But what hit me, what struck me was, it doesn't matter what field you're in, coaching, what sport you're in, even me growing up in the theater and in ballet. What's important is that you understand, like for you two, it's not about winning, fencing, medals. That's not your end goal. Your end goal is, how can you become the best versions of yourselves through the experience that you have in training and competing in fencing? Because at the end of the day, nobody cares how many medals you have. Nobody cares how many rings I have. What matters is sport, and I believe this with every ounce of my being, sport is a masterclass in learning really, really, really tough life lessons that you will not learn in the classroom. Like sport completes academia. And when you really appreciate all of what going through the struggles of sport, the highs and lows of sport, learning how to, in sport, we call it shortening the distance between failure and recovery. So you have a bad, I'm sorry, I'm not going to use the terminology because I'll use it incorrectly, but if you had a bad moment, how quickly do you recover? I mean, those are all life lessons that you don't learn in the classroom. And I realized that my job as a head coach of the UCLA gymnastics team was, I'm going to develop champions in life that are going to go out in the world and make the world a better place through the sport of gymnastics. And that's what got me super excited. And consequently, that's when we really started winning medals, rings.
That's super cool. So our next question is kind of about you changing your coaching style. So, in some of your interviews, you talk about how before you kind of were a little bit of a bully and then you decided to change. So, was there a specific moment that triggered this change?
Um, yeah, I would say the moment was a few years into my coaching, and I think it's really important, especially nowadays, because young people, all of us actually, are we have more of a voice. We've taken our voice, we've owned it. The Me Too movement, what happened with the gymnastics situation in this country, with the sexual abuse scandal, but it's everywhere. I think it's super important to for people to differentiate being held accountable in a very strict way, even by a dictator, being bullied and being abused. And like it's like the spectrum is very, very large. And so I would say that I was a dictator, and I wouldn't say I was a bully because a bully makes it personal. Like I never called my athletes names or made jokes at their expense. I never crossed that line. And if I did, I don't remember doing that. But I do remember dictating orders. It's like I remember growing up and my dad saying, do it because I said so. And then I remember my mom explaining why I should do something a certain way. And so I was a dictator because I didn't know the why. Like as the girls are doing conditioning and they're exhausted, and some of them maybe puking or something because we're conditioning them so hard, I didn't think to explain to them the process and what we're going to go through over these 8 months that we're going to be together towards the national championship, and why putting it that extreme effort right now is so important. I never explained that. I just was like, just do it. And if you don't want to do it, then get out of the gym. That's being, in my opinion, bullish. But I never said you're lazy. I never said, I mean, when it becomes personal, that's when you've crossed a line. But I was definitely bullish. And I just felt that's how all head coaches acted. And when you look back in a history of sport, a lot of them did, and a lot of them still do. And thankfully, I have been, like I said, from the very beginning, a true student of learning. And I absolutely believe that the only time people change is through education. And so I've always been a reader. I've always loved to read. And I read leadership books, I read motivational books, I read psychological books. And I learned and this is what I say in my TED Talk, but instead of dictating change to my athletes, if I would take the time to explain and motivate them, the end result is so much richer and long lasting. Because when I'll think about with myself. I stopped dancing when I was 22. I lived in LA. Everybody in LA is like a workout queen. And I don't like to work out. I just don't. I like to dance, but I don't like to work out. So for how many years, 30 years or so, I never consistently did physical exercise. And I remember dictating to myself saying, okay, you are going to work out 5 days this week, and you are going to go running, and you're going to go I hate to run, and you're going to run, and you're going to do this and that and this. But there was no motivation behind why I was telling myself to do this. Then 5 years ago, I get diagnosed with breast cancer. And my doctor says to me, I don't care what you do physically, but you need to pick something and you need to do it consistently. And it would be really good if it was resistance training. Okay, guess what? I had my motivation. I was diagnosed with a potentially fatal disease. And here's with my doctor telling me, along with the chemotherapy and the surgery, another component to you getting well is exercise. That's all the motivation I needed. I got into Pilates, and I wake up excited now to go to a Pilates class. And it took me 30 years to find the motivation to do that. But that's the difference between dictating to someone what to do and motivating them. Motivation comes from the inside, and it is life altering when you motivate someone to change in a positive way.
I think that's really awesome. That was some really great advice. Um, so where was I? Sorry, I
I
just
want to get something. I want to get back to something that you said at the very, 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 very beginning of this, and that was talking about the physical health and mental health of athletes. And what I learned coaching is that they absolutely go hand in hand. And the athletes that are chronically injured, not all the time, not 100% of the time, but quite a bit of the time, the athletes that continue to get injured or have a serious injury are those who are not mentally healthy. They're the ones that have the most negative talk. They're the ones that come in with that dark cloud and with the negativity of I'm not good enough. I suck at this. I'm not as good as my teammate. I'm never going to get this skill. Oh my gosh, the coaches hate me. Like that mentality. I wish I would have been a researcher because I would have wish I would have documented all of this. But across the board, they're the ones that got the most injured. And like I said, I don't want to say that's 100% because I know full well that I know athletes that got injured that have great mental game. But I just feel like on the whole, the two, your mental game, your emotional, the three, and your physical, they're all connected. And you can't separate them. You can't have a negative mindset and expect to be physically healthy. It doesn't work.
I think that's really interesting to see sort of like the connection between your mental and physical health. So like
Well, this, okay. Um, I don't remember. You're Malika.
yes.
Think about this. If, well, shoot, I just had my thought. I'll think about it. I'll let you know.
So deciding to make a change and like actually making that change are two like really different things. So what steps did you take to sort of like make that change to better support your athletes?
Oh, I remember what I was going to tell you. I had my team ask me for a team meeting, and I got super excited because I love team meetings. And for 2 solid hours, they told me how my coaching style was hurtful and it was suppressive and it did not lift them up and make them want to do better. They were simply being compliant, being told what to do. And thankfully, I didn't dismiss them, after 15 minutes and say, this meeting's over. I'm the head coach, my way, the highway. If you don't like it, go someplace else. Thankfully, I did not say that. I listened for 2 hours. It was hard. It was really like arrows, 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 arrows. And I had my reckoning. Okay, Valorie, you can either keep doing the things the way you're doing it, understanding that you're not motivating these young women that have, I literally look at it as a blessing that I've had this opportunity my whole life. You're not motivating them to want to learn and be better. You're not motivating them to want to develop a tight team culture. All you're doing is producing compliant, good, loyal soldiers. And how is that helping the world in any way? So I changed and I started changing. I started listening more. This is a really cool fact. If you write out the word listen and you rearrange the letters, it spells silent. Isn't that cool? And to totally, truly listen, we have to learn and develop the skill. It's a skill that you develop over time of silencing our minds. Because I don't know about you guys, but for me, when someone's talking, the natural thing for me to do is to start thinking of what I want to say as soon as they shut up. That's not listening at all. That's not listening. That's listening to yourself. It's not listening to them. And that's the first thing that the first skill that I started deliberately working on. And then I worked on making sure they had a safe space that they could say anything they wanted to me as long as it was honest and respectful. And that usually meant in my office, not in front of the whole team. And so I started just stacking my little blocks for how I wanted to change. And all of those things, like I keep saying, are skills. They're not just things that you can say, okay, great, I'm going to be a good listener now. Done for the rest of my life. It doesn't happen like that. It's like building a muscle. It literally is a muscle. I mean, you're building the mental muscle of being able to stop thinking when someone else is talking and start listening. And I remember what I wanted to say to you, Malika, when you were talking about how cool it is to think about the connection. I am not a scientist. So in my little pea brain mind, it's so simple. The only part of your body that tells other parts of your body what to do is your brain. So your arm doesn't move. Your arm's not going to do that and do that on its own. Your arm does that because your brain tells it what to do. And it's the same thing with your emotions. Your brain doesn't, I mean, unless you have a mental disability, your brain doesn't just your brain doesn't fixate on negative or positive things. Your brain fixates on what you tell it to fixate on. It's a muscle. And so when you exercise and work that muscle, that is going to determine your emotions, which is going to determine your actions. And that's the important thing, is that we all have to realize that we have control over our thoughts. And I know this is it's a fascinating concept, but it's also a little daunting, because every time I talk to our team about this, I usually have at least one girl come up to me in my office and say, Ms. Val, you know that you can control your mind thing? Well, I just don't believe it, because I can't help it when I go to Mean Girl. I've had like 5 athletes tell me that over the years. I'm like, you can't help your mind when your mind goes to Mean Girl. So you just keep feeding those thoughts. Like, you can't not feed those thoughts and think something positive about the person that you want to be Mean Girl to. Is that a Mean Girl? They're like, no. I'm like, okay, well, yes, you can. And when you start, this is the important part. And this is like, I noticed this happen about a year and a half after they come to college. So halfway through their sophomore year, I would notice this shift. And it was when they started understanding that they can control their thoughts. Because I'm going to say it again, your thoughts control your emotions, which control your actions. And every single thing you do in life is going to have numerous repercussions. So your thoughts and the choices that you make in your thoughts are going to dictate the type of a life you live. When that clicked, the cool part about that is you can no longer be a victim in life. When you take control of your thoughts and your actions, you can no longer say, I don't have friends because girls are mean. You take accountability and you say, what am I doing to create this environment? You can no longer say, I failed the class because the teacher hates me. Nope. What were you doing to achieve that grade, that poor grade? And I think that's like when people say, what are the things I'm most proud of in my career, my coaching career, is when those moments when athletes came to me and said, I got it. You know, that whole life is about choice thing. The choices you make dictate the life you live. I got it. And then for me, being able to be around them every day, I could see their lives literally blossom. That's what happened with Caitlin Ohashi, the one whose floor routine went viral, 180 million views. And it was not until she started understanding that she could live a different, happier, more joyful life. And all she had to do was change her mindset. That's when she started. And she said to me, that's when I really started feeling my self-worth. And that's when I really started loving myself. And that's not just that's not saying you're perfect. That's not saying you have perfect thoughts all the time. It's just owning your thoughts, changing them, feeding the thoughts that you want to be strong, that are going to help you move forward in a positive way, starving the thoughts that aren't going to help you. And the most important part is not judging yourself when you have negative thoughts. But don't wallow in that negativity. Let it go. And this is another little thing that I love to tell kids is your brain cannot think of two totally different thoughts at the same time. So your brain cannot think, I got this, and I suck at the same time. What happens is, and I've spoken with people in the profession about this, is your brain ping pongs back and forth from I'm great, I suck, I'm great, I suck, I suck. But they can't coexist in your brain. So choose one and repeat it over and over and over and over until the negativity dissolves.
That's super cool. It actually connects really well into our next question. So you talked about how you were trying to change the mindset of your athletes when you were changing your approach, but that also meant them taking more responsibility for your actions, like you were talking about. So was everybody on board with this approach right away?
With the new approach? No, that's a great question. I haven't been asked that question ever. Good job, you guys. No, come to think of it. But the reason they weren't on board with the new approach was because of the patterns that they had had in the past, especially the really, really high elite athletes that I received. They were coached in a way of a dictator type of way, and they didn't have a voice and they didn't have a say. And the year 2000, we had one of the most impressive freshman classes come in the history of gymnastics. And one of their athletes, Jamie Dancher, she was right off of the Olympic team. And she was in the gym. And part of my newfound way of coaching was to get them to dialogue and communicate and ask them their opinions. And we were on floor and I wanted her to do a leap combination. And she looked at me, and Jamie could be really sarcastic and she could be kind of abrasive because she's super, super smart. And her mind was like really much quicker than mine. But she looked at me and she goes, it's not going to work. And I thought, okay, here we go. You know, here's the rub. Here's an athlete challenging me as the head coach. I'm asking her to do something. She comes right back to me and says, that's not going to work. And I said, yeah, it will. And we went back and forth and back and forth. And finally, instead of just arguing like that, finally, Jamie said, Miss Val, listen to me. Listen, right? I had to silence my mind. Listen to me. I can't, that combination is not going to work because the foot that I land on in the first leap is the foot I'm supposed to take off on for the next one. And I've got to take a step into it. So it's not going to work. It's like I'm landing on the wrong feet. And I went, oh, okay, you're right. I'm sorry. So I listened, I processed, I got my ego out of it, and I said, I'm sorry. And she was dumbfounded. And she thought it was a test that I said, I'm sorry. And later on, she said to me, I'd never heard those words come out of a coach's mouth. And so she kind of like shut down when I said, oh, okay, I'm sorry. And she told me, in fact, it's in my book. She says she thought it was a test. And I think a lot of athletes that are brought up with this very, very strict way of coaching that don't have a voice, when you ask them their opinion about things, they don't speak up because they think it's a test and they're going to get in trouble. So great question. No, it took, you know what? I'm realizing, and the more I'm talking and doing Zooms like this, I'm realizing the importance of relationships. And the hard part with coaching athletes is we don't have enough time to even get through the workout that we want to do and the conditioning and all of that and the watching film and everything. We don't have time to sit around and develop a relationship. However, if we do take those micro moments through the course of the day and develop that relationship, the number one ingredient in the relationship is trust. And when you develop trust with someone, your relationship isn't perfect, but the trust allows you to give them the grace of their intention. So their intention wasn't to hurt you. My intention when I would get bullish or when I would dictate something after I had developed a relationship and trust with these athletes allowed them to let it roll off their back and for them to go, Miss Val's just having a bad day. And I'm not going to take it personally. And that is, I believe, is a key to how all coaches in all sports should consider moving forward in this one. I'm so excited about this era that we're in because everybody's talking about this now. We didn't talk about this even 10 years ago, but we're all talking about it now. And those skills, they're called soft skills, which I hate that term. They're not soft skills, they're power skills of listening, communicating, compassion, humility, vulnerability. All those things are really strong power skills. And the coaches and the leaders in the business world and in politics and everything, the leaders that embrace those skills as power skills, they're the ones that are really going to be taking us into the future in a very strong and positive way.
So that actually, again, leads on perfectly to our next question. So like, obviously your team was sort of hurt with your old approach. So how did you win back their trust?
Communication and giving them a safe space to talk. I had a lot of team meetings and I had a lot of individual meetings. And when I would ask like an athlete that wasn't abiding by team rules or something like that to come into my office, I would ask them for permission to be able to tell them what I'm thinking, what I'm seeing. You know, do I have permission? I have your permission to basically let you know where you're screwing up. And then all the time, you know, they would come back with their version, with their truth, with their insight of what they felt. And once again, it was just developing that relationship. And when I look back, one of the greatest examples of this is Jeanette Antolin. She was part of that 2000 freshman team as well. And she's in my book. There's a whole chapter in my book about the desert and how we all end up in the desert during multiple times of our lives. And it's super important to figure out how not just to walk around in circles in the desert, but how to get out of the desert. Yes, it's biblical, Old Testament. But Jeanette came in, she was absolutely one of the greatest competitors in the country. And she just was defiant and broke team rules constantly. And one day in the gym just said to me, I don't want anybody to tell me what to do ever again. And I was like, well, okay. And I remember saying to her, Jeanette, then you need to go live on a desert island because that's not how the world works. And then she broke a few more rules to the point that she got kicked off the team and her scholarship got taken away. And she was in my office. And because it was only, I mean, we'd only had a few years together, but because it was a mutual relationship, it wasn't just me developing a relationship, but it was her coming to the table as well. I could sit in that office as she's sobbing, and I could honestly say to her, Jeanette, I am not trying to make your life miserable. And I absolutely believe this is going to be the best year of your life because you're going to learn to solely hold on to your strength, your inner strength, and rely on yourself with nobody else. And she thought I was crazy and mean and the whole bit. And the team was not happy that she got kicked off the team. And she took a deep breath and said, okay. And basically her parents, thankfully her parents said to her, okay, you had a full scholarship. Now you don't got any money coming in. Regardless of how wrong you think Miss Val is, you need to have some accountability here. So you need to go get a job. So Jeanette went and got 2 jobs, stayed in school, went to workouts at night in the rec part of UCLA gymnastic, or the rec part, recreation. And I think it was like 6 months later, her teammates came to me. The teammates on the team came and said, "We think that you should reconsider letting Jeanette on the team." And I was like, "No." She was kicked off the team. Her scholarship was taken away. They said, "Miss Val, she really, really has changed." I remember them saying, "She's changed." I saw her cut up her fake ID the other night. It's like, that was a big deal. I was like, okay. I said, "Well, you know what? Have her come in and talk to me." So she came in and talked to me. And it wasn't like this kumbaya love fest at all, but it was very respectful. And she just said, "This is what I've learned in the time that I've been off the team. I learned to count on myself. I learned to rely on myself. I learned I really like myself," which was huge. And she earned her way back on the team. And she was sadly, one of the sexual abuse victims in the Larry Nassar scandal. And she has come forward and said openly that going through what she went through, the hard times at UCLA, is what gave her the strength to be able to stand up for herself, use her voice, and look her abuser in the eye and just tell him how he had hurt her. So I think that's a really good example of strong, tough love. I think that term tough love is being way overused now. But me having literally tough love for her, because I didn't kick her off the team because I didn't like her. I kicked her off the team because she wasn't being accountable to the team rules. Simple.
Thank you so much. So our next question is kind of also about you changing the culture. So you changed it from being all about winning to more focusing on success. But that's really hard because winning is kind of a tangible concept. You have to be like faster or stronger than other people. But success is more philosophical and it's different for everyone. So how can somebody take this concept of success and come up with achievable goals?
I think it's super, super important for all of us to redefine success. And part of success, the fun part of success, is winning, being the best at what you're doing, whether it's the best in your high school, college, or the world. That's that's what athletes love. We are competitive beings. Even if we're not athletes, we are competitive beings. We love to compete and win. Winning is really, really fun. But if you place your self-worth and your happiness only on winning, you're going to live a very sad, unfulfilled life the majority of your life. Because as we all know, only one team or one person gets to hold up that trophy. And so every year there were a few years where I didn't talk about winning at all. And athletes didn't like it. And the assistant coaches didn't like it. They're like, "We're here to compete to win. We're not competing to just see how we do. We're competing to win." So at the beginning of every year, we would set our goals. And our goals were April 23rd, we're going to win the national championship. Equal to that, if not above that goal, is to leave our season, to leave that competition floor with no regrets. So there were many years that we lost the national championship by a quarter of a tenth. And in gymnastics, that's this. That much of a bobble is what we lost the national championship by. We also won some championships by a quarter of a tenth. So why would I base my self-worth as a coach and the student athletes, everything, that the grit and the hard work and the heart and the soul that they put in that season, why would I base that off of one night, one thing? Especially, it's not just gymnastics that is severely judged. All sports are judged. And judges are human. So why would I base it off of that? So this is the big part of my TED Talk. This was the whole impetus behind why I wanted to have this TED Talk is, and it begs the question, is all winning success? No, it's not. And I think it's super, super important, even with you two twins, okay? Identical in so many ways, but you both need to define what your personal success is. And it can't be what the others is. And it can't be what it was last year. Because guess what? We're in this weird quarantine time thing going on here. So what does success look like for you individually, you two, individually? What is success going to look like for you in the spring or pick a date, summer. What does success look like for you then? Is it to get stronger? Is it to get leaner? Is it to get more agile? Is it going to have more cardio? Is it to eat better? Is it to have a better mindset? Is it to work on your mental game? What does success look like for you come June 1st? I'm just picking that name out of hat. And then you back it up and you start making your small goals, your monthly goals, your weekly goals, your daily goals. And at the end of the day, you sit down, you have some quiet time, not with each other, but just with yourself. And you go over your day and you go through your little checklist. Did I get 1% better in achieving my goal? And if you can say that, then yay, you've had a successful day. And celebrate those small victories in your mind. Just like, yeah, I am so good. I am such a badass. I'm great at this. And then wake up the next day, hit that refresh button in yourself and start again. And the goal is to get 1% better. That is success.
That's some really awesome advice. We wish that more people thought that way. So sort of going back to your old approach, the athletes that you trained with your old approach, did you ever like go back and speak with them, like reconcile with them?
Yeah. The ones that are open to a conversation, absolutely. A lot of them. There are a few that are not. There are a few that I've reached out to that will not. Hopefully someday before I die, they will. One of the greatest coaches that ever lived, the coach John Wooden, greatest. Sports Illustrated hailed him as the greatest coach of all time. He had athletes that hadn't spoken to him. He died when he was 99 in 9 months. He had an athlete, didn't speak to him for 25 years. And then one day, Coach Wooden got a phone call from him and they became really good friends, even wrote a book together after that. So, we're all on our own journeys. And the athletes that are not open to receiving, having a conversation, resolution, they're going through their own stuff, and that's okay. We all go through, it's called seasons of life. And there were times I remember going through menopause when I was 50 and I was not in a good place, my headspace. And if somebody had come to me and said, let's talk, I'd be like, nah, come back to me in a few years, But the one, I love the conversations with girls. In fact, it just happened with Black Lives Matter. And I talked with not every African-American athlete or Black athlete that I had on the team, but I reached out to a handful of them. And I loved the feedback that I received and their recollection of, you know what, Miss Val, remember when you said this to me? That really hurt my feelings. It's like, I had no clue. And we would have never had that conversation had what happened with Black Lives Matter in the spring not exploded. And I really welcome those conversations. And thankfully, I shut up and listened. Thankfully, they listened when I explained that was never my intention to hurt you. And our relationship is stronger than it's ever been.
It's super awesome to see that you could go back and sort of rebuild your relationship with those athletes. So I think that's really cool.
Well, is there one human being that's ever lived that is perfect, that hasn't said or done something to hurt somebody else? No. And we do it all the time, and we do it a lot of the time without knowing that we're hurting someone, that what we have said has triggered them. And it's like, it's not a trigger for me, so I don't realize it. But it's like, and I was asking my friend the other day, I'm like, I'm kind of worried about myself. Why don't I remember a lot of things that happened? And she was explaining that, we tend to remember the things that are important to us, that affect us personally, not that affect somebody else personally. And that made a lot of sense to me.
Thank you so much. So our next question is, so kind of a lot of times excessive training and then abusive coaching are justified with the concept of tough love. So, or saying like it's for the athlete's own good. So where do you draw the line between tough love and then abusive coaching or excessive training?
I think the simple answer is the tough love part is when it gets personal. And so think about this. The only reason any of us need a coach in our lives is to help us do things we can't do on our own. So if I'm coaching an athlete that is on the lazy side and doesn't really enjoy working out and pushing through, doesn't get excited about that every day, it's my job as a coach to push her and to show her she is capable of much more than she's asking herself to do, and explain to her, okay, if you push yourself through this conditioning circuit today, we start competitive season in a month. Do you know how much easier your flow routine is going to be if you put in the work today? And if you don't, and if you cheat, and if you're supposed to do 10 perfect leg lifts and you're doing 8 because nobody is watching or counting you, and you have poor form, that is going to translate to your competition day. And that's what we're working for you to be as prepared emotionally, mentally, and physically as possible on competition day. So this is the reason why, if you put absolute excellent intention into everything you do, it will build upon itself and you will really enjoy your first competition and probably not get injured because you're doing the work. What was the question?
The question was like, where do you draw the line between excessive?
Yeah. And once again, it's developing a relationship with your athlete. And it's about when they come to you and they say, my back hurts, it's being able to have a dialogue with them and saying, okay, is it like bad pain or just muscle pain? You know, you guys know most of the time. Coaches don't know if it's, and that's the hard part. That's where the trust comes into play, because God, I mean, all coaches have had athletes that we just don't believe that when they say they're hurting, their back hurts, it's like they don't want to do the work. And what do you do with that? And so the easiest thing to do is to say, I'm sorry, you got to do it or go home. The hard way of coaching is to say, come here, let's talk about your back. When did it start hurting? What is the pain like? Is it going other places? Is it new pain, or is it pain that you've worked through before? Is it getting, and asking all those questions. Thankfully in college, head coaches cannot make those decisions on their own. Thankfully in college, we have a team of athletic trainer and sports psychologists and team physician and chiropractor and massage therapist and all that to help make that decision as to whether there really is an issue here or not. I mean, the first thing they would do is go get an X-ray or MRI. But I just, the more I talk about all this stuff, the more I'm convinced that everything we do in life is easier and is done with a better attitude and more truthful and honest when we have honest, trusting relationships with the people we're working with. So athletes to coaches, or husband to wife, or parents to child, the whole thing. If a kid can come to a parent and just say, I don't want to go to practice. Like I remember, okay, I'm gonna use myself. I studied piano. I hated piano lessons. I hated them. I did not want to study. Why? Because all I learned were the classics. And I finally said to my mom one day, I was like, I don't want to play that stuff. I want to play Elton John. And she talked to my piano teacher and said, is it possible to do, 20 minutes of the classical training and then 10 minutes of Elton John? And the piano teacher said, yeah. My attitude changed like that. I went into my piano lesson with a totally different attitude than I'd ever had, because I communicated, my mom listened, and we came to a compromise that wasn't going to hinder my piano playing. I did that with an athlete one time. Pua Hall, she was so cute. She came in freshman year, and freshmen tend to get out of their best physical shape because the dorm food is so good and you can have as much of it as you want. And she was just like, I just got to tell you, Miss Val, I love cake. It's like, okay. And I was like, well, how often are you having cake? She goes, oh, every day. I was like, well, maybe as an elite athlete, you shouldn't be having cake every day. So we compromised. I think she had cake twice a week or something like that. Where before when I was first starting out, I would have just said, you can't eat cake ever. Elite athletes don't eat cake. But here's another example of coaching mistake, but intention being honorable. In gymnastics, gymnastics is physics. And so if you grow, your gymnastics changes. If you grow out, your gymnastics changes. Your body, the wear and tear on your body is substantial. And so we used to weigh our athletes once a week in the 80s and 90s. And then I started hearing that the athletes would starve themselves a few days before they knew they were getting weighed. Well, we don't want that to happen. So we would weigh them randomly. Well, then they would just start like not eating at all until they got weighed. And then they would just binge and eat everything for a few days. Well, we don't want that to happen. So in my brain, I was like, you know what? Let's have them take control of the scale. Because right now the scale has control over them. Let's weigh them every day. Brilliant idea. And our athletic trainer was on board with it, and the team physician was on board with it. And it's like, you know what? It's going to be painful for a few weeks, but it's finally going to break that hold that the scale has over them. It never worked. They were miserable. The girls were absolutely emotionally a wreck. And I was like, thankfully, it just took a few weeks. And I was going, well, this is not working. So we stopped weighing them all together. But that's a great example of coaching tough love with proper intention. That was absolutely the wrong thing to do.
So sort of connecting onto that, a lot of athletes are criticized because like they don't look a certain way. So what can coaches do to make sure that athletes feel comfortable in their own bodies?
Once again, I think it's super important to discuss what success looks like for you as individuals. So if I have an athlete I've had plenty of these athletes who on the bigger, heavier side, and the quote unquote look for gymnasts, it really is prepubescent. It's like 14-year-old girl who's not gone through puberty yet. But that's not realistic for adult athletes. And this is the hard part. It's usually harder for them than it is. I guess there's still some coaches that are like that, but to be able to not look at, like I said, a scale, a number on the scale, but to look at your body composition, to look at what is success going to look like for you this year, as far as your strength, your body mass index, your flexibility. What is that going to physically look like for what you're going to do, how you're going to reprogram your mind for what you eat, and understanding it's fuel, including cake once or twice a week, if that really makes you feel good. I had an athlete, Kyla Ross, when she was in the Olympics and won a gold medal. She was 5'2", pre-puberty. As soon as the Olympics were over, she grew 5 inches. In gymnastics, that's like trying to do gymnastics 5 inches taller is like having a total out-of-body experience. And she struggled for about 2 years trying to get control over what her new mature body should look and feel like as an adult elite athlete gymnast. And try to go back to what she was before was insanity. So to talk to her about your goals, let's talk about success. What's going to look like this year? Miss Val, I want to get through a season without having lower shin pain. My lower leg pain is so painful. How are we going to do that? I need to get leaner and I need it stronger. Okay, how do you want to do that? And having the conversation and the trust. I keep coming back to the trust that I can talk to her about getting leaner without her leaving my office and saying Miss Val called me fat, which has happened to a lot of coaches.
Thank you so much. So I think we have like 2 minutes left, so we'll try to
Okay.
just one question from the audience.
Sure.
So this year, the coronavirus has presented a unique challenge for athletes all over the world who are accustomed to drawing energy from their coaches and teammates. So many of us have started training in isolation because of this. So do you have any advice for staying motivated and energized during this time?
Yeah. Yeah, I do. First of all, to realize that this is not going to last forever. You're not going to be training in isolation forever. Second of all, is if you just think about how am I going to get through this time, you are going to have wasted months of training, daily training that you could get better. So instead of going through this time, I've encouraged kids the last 10 months, let's figure out how to grow through this time. So once again, looking at set a goal April 1st, and what do you want to look at? And we call it RAW, ruthlessly attack your weaknesses. And so the one thing that so figure out what your physical weaknesses are. Okay, are they strength? And what part of your body? Are they flexibility? What part of your body? And figure out a plan with your coach to work on those. I would imagine every single athlete can work on fueling their bodies. Have a conversation with your parents. Have a conversation with a nutritionist, because a lot of coaches don't know proper nutrition for their sport. Do your research, and then the number one area that every single athlete on the planet should be becoming a superhero at during this time of quarantine is their mental game. You can do endless mental routines without getting injured, and focusing on that mental game, and that shortening the time between failure and recovery, because even when you start going through a match in your head, you're going to make mistakes. You're not going to win every match in your head. Finish it, stop it, take a deep breath, hit the refresh button, figure out what you need to do to have a better result the next time, and then start going through it again in your mental game. And I mean, this is not anything new. Everybody knows it's the mental game of athletes that separates the good from the great. And to not look at this time as oh, poor me, I've had to sit in quarantine and train by myself, but to look at, you have to find some things to be grateful for. Gratitude changes the chemistry in your brain, and it changes your body and what you're feeling. And so instead of thinking negatively, to be able to think, okay, wow, you know what? I'm quarantined. At least I have a house. And at least I have food. And at least I have space that I can actually work on. I mean, all you need is like a 4 square by 4 square space to work on your strength, your core, your hip conditioning, your shoulders, your arms, and then your mental game, and figure out what, again, control the controllables. Don't try to control the things that are out of your control, like quarantine, and figure out within the things that you can control, how can I literally get 1% better today? So that when we are finally done and I get to get back in the gym and start training, I'm actually going to be better than when we started this whole thing in March.
Thank you. Do we have time for one more question really
Sure.
quick?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
This is in the Q&A. So did you think about making a routine viral when you created it?
No, you can't do that. And the athletes that did think about that were very, very disillusioned. Once again, oh, that's a great question, because that goes to setting your goal to winning. Because there's so many variables that come into winning or not winning that are out of your control. Control the controllables. So the athletes that focused on wanting to be that next viral phenom were very disillusioned. But I did figure out the equation of all the routines that did go viral, and I did choreograph the routines to give them the best possibility to go viral. And that was like the music had to be recognizable, because the reason why people go viral is not just the gymnastics community that's watching them, it's normal human beings around the world that found something exciting about them. The first thing that the first sense that they're going to have is the music. So that, in my opinion, needs to be recognizable. And then the dance and the choreography can't be highbrow. It can't be up here. It has to be street, fun, funky moves that anybody can do in their living room. And then there has to be a sense of joy associated with the performance. And those are the three things that I think are like the key ingredients about creating viral videos. But everybody said, like Caitlin's last video, they said, oh, you know, she went viral because she got a 10. That is absolutely not true. She went viral the year before, quicker, to more views. She got a 995. Has nothing to do with the score. Nothing.
Thank you so much. I think, unfortunately, that is all we have time for, but any last pieces of advice for our audience?
Yes. This is a wonderful time of the year to give yourselves, to receive grace and to allow yourself to not have to be perfect, and to be able to say, you know, wow, I said that came out of my mouth. That was really crummy. Okay. And to make amends. And we are all hurting because of what we've been going through with COVID. There's not a person on the planet who's not heightened emotionally because of what we've been going through. To recognize that, and when your emotions start getting overwhelming, to be able to just sit back, pause. I think the greatest thing that I've been doing, the practice that I've been doing, is I literally just step out of my house and go for a walk. And within a second and a half, my mood is changing and the sadness is lifting. And to not judge yourselves and to not judge others. And if we can learn, develop those skills stronger and better through COVID, then growing through this time will have been worth it.
Thank you so much. We really enjoyed speaking with you today. You gave us some super valuable information, so thank you.
Wonderful. And thank you all for having me, and happy holidays to all of you.
Happy holidays. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.